Do you remember your wedding day? The married people in the room, do you remember your wedding day? I hope so. If not, yes, thank you, Todd. One was really ready for that. If you're married, all the work, all the preparation, the stress. Anybody remember that stress? No? All the guys are like, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about." Color choices and seating arrangements and food selections and the venue. And I'm stressing some of you out just thinking about it because there's a wedding coming up in your family and you're thinking, "I don't want to talk about it right now. I want to ignore and override. I'm just not going to pay attention to it." There's so much that goes on up until that moment, right? You're stressed out thinking about the wedding and all the things that have to be taken care of. But the ceremony comes and you finally have that day to where you can just relax and you take a deep breath and you realize all the work that we've been through over the last few months, and by we, I mean usually the wife and their family, that they're working so hard and taking care of all these decisions and making sure everything is just right. All of it leads up to this moment to where the ladies, you walk down the aisle, you and your spouse kiss one another, and the officiant makes it legal by signing the marriage covenant. And sometimes you end up with something like me, to where I sign your marriage covenant and I forget to mail it in. And then I get texts from the couple like, "Hey, did you mail it in?" "I think I did." "No, I did not." "All right, great. You're not married, but now you are." Much of what we have discussed in studying this book has led up to this moment that we are going to discuss today. We've seen that they've done all the hard work, Boaz and Ruth. They've done all the hard work. They've had all the conversations, right? They've done all the planning. They've done all the preparation. All the legal stuff is out of the way. And now they can become husband and wife, and Boaz can marry his wife, Ruth. She becomes his bride. He's the redeemer. And we're going to see this story today is going to come full circle for all of us as we close out this series. We've been studying this book, Ruth, for the last couple of weeks, and I want to give a recap, one for those that haven't been here maybe for a week or two, and then also because I think it's good as we're closing this out to kind of see from beginning to end what this story looked like and what has been taking place in the story as we've been reading it. And so in this book, there's three main characters. You have Naomi, you have Ruth, and you have Boaz. There's a few other characters like Elimelech, which we're going to talk about today. But Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz are the three main characters that we hear about in this story. Naomi was married to a man named Elimelech, and she and her husband, they're facing a famine in Bethlehem. There's all kinds of challenges and struggles, and so they decide, let's go to the country of Moab, and we're going to be there. We're going to find greener pastures, so to speak, to where we can take care of our family, we can feed ourselves. And what seemed to be a way for them to get away and to find respite from the famine becomes this season of complete grief and just kind of awfulness for this lady named Naomi. In a matter of 10 years, her husband passes away, and both of her sons pass away, Mahlon and Chilion. They pass away, and now here's this widow living in this foreign land, far away from her homeland in Judah, which is in Bethlehem, which is in Judah. And so in this time, her daughter-in-law, Ruth, this Moabite woman, decides, you know what, I'm going to stick with you. I'm going to cling to you. I'm going to follow you. Wherever you go, I will go. Your God is going to be my God, and your people are going to be my people. And so it's at this moment that we see Ruth, really one of the first people outside of the family of God, the people of Israel, the Jews, the Israelites. It's one of the first times we see in the scripture where somebody from the outside gets welcomed in, is grafted into the family of God. And if you're not familiar with Bible history or how it works, that's really good news for you and I. It's really good news for you and I. So this daughter-in-law, she stays with her. She comes back to Judah. They come back to Bethlehem, and they find this redeemer named Boaz. And the way the law was written, this Levirate law was designed by God for the protection of the widow, because to be a widow in the in the ancient world, the ancient Near East, was not an easy life. They were very visible in how they grieved. There was no real jobs available for them, and so most of their life from that point on was to be lived as poor in poverty, gleaning in the field, kind of picking beggars. And so this is a life that they were ahead, but there's this law that God put into place that said, hey, if you have the closest living relative of the husband is able to marry the widow, then it would solve the problem. It would take care of them. And so that's what we've been leading up to, all this work that we've done in this series, Just Like Your Wedding, is leading to a ceremony that we're reading about today in Ruth chapter 4, if you have your Bibles. It's going to be on the screen as well. Ruth chapter 4. I'm in the wrong passage here. There we go. We're going to be in verses 13 through 22 today. And this is what it says. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." And then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap, and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. I had to look that up because I was really having a really hard time not saying salmon. Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. A lot of scripture this morning, right? How many are thankful that you don't have to do a whole sermon series on a genealogy, right? Genealogies are interesting. It's kind of thrown in here at the end of it, but it's telling us a bigger part of the story here. So let's look back at verse 13, where it says, "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. And the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son." I want you to notice something here, the progression that takes place in this story. This is God's design for us as followers of Jesus. If you call yourself a follower of Jesus, if you say that you have put your trust in Jesus, this is our design. That for those that have the desire to be married, for those that have that longing, for those that are becoming married, this is the design that God has laid out for us, is to find a spouse, is to consummate the marriage, is to enjoy intimacy with your spouse, is to have children, in that order. Now, we get this backwards a lot in our culture and our time, because nowadays people date, they move in together, they share intimacy, then they get married. This is not to say that God does not have grace for us. This is not to say that God is not merciful towards us when we fail or when we mess up, or that our past looks different than what the scriptures say that it should look like. It's not to say that, but it is to say that we are to do things in a certain order, in a certain way. Now, when it comes to relationships, we know this, that order is very important to how God designed them and what we are called to do. But here's what I would say. I know that it's 2023, but with all the pastoral love I could give, especially young couples that are praying about getting married, no matter how modern our culture gets, we don't base our lives off of culture. We base our life off the Word of God. And this is a short little window into the design of God, is that we are to love our spouse, our future spouse, but we're not to share intimacy, physical intimacy in that way before we are to be married. We are to get married, and then you are to enjoy intimacy with your spouse, and then you are to have children. Doesn't mean you have to have children, but it does mean that this is the order of progression in relationships. But I want us to focus in this verse on this line that says that the Lord gave her conception. The Lord gave her conception. This is a line that can bring great joy to many. For those that have had children, for those that are having children, or those that are now pregnant and you're looking forward to that day, it can bring great joy. And it's like, wow, look at, like, the Lord gave us these children. Sometimes you parents, you need to remind yourself that you were one day excited when your kids are disobeying and going a little bit crazy, that you saw your children as a gift from the Lord. This line can also be a line that brings great pain for those that are struggling or have struggled with infertility. And here's what I would tell you if you're here today and you're walking through that season, and it's challenging and it's frustrating and it's disappointing, and test after test that's not working. You're going to the doctor to figure things out. Let me just tell you, don't let bitterness rise up in you. Don't let bitterness rise up. Pray through it, process it, recognize the pain that you are walking through, because the Lord sees your pain. He knows your pain. He knows what you're walking through. He can feel the hurt and the bitterness that you have in your life because of what's happening. But what we believe that this is saying really is that all children are a gift from the Lord. All children are a gift from the Lord. What we're seeing, I believe, in our culture is that now children and pregnancy is seen as an inconvenience rather than a gift. We see pregnancy and children as an inconvenience, not as a gift. It seems like every week we're hearing a story of some other celebrity that's saying, well, I just wasn't ready. Didn't think I would be a good mom or a good dad. It's an inconvenience to your plans. I wanted to get my career off the ground before I had. I wasn't planning on this. God have mercy on us in our culture, that we don't see children as a gift from the Lord. Let's look at verse 14. You come to hear the story about Ruth, but you're getting politics today, right? You like that? Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. And may his name, this Redeemer, be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." This story takes an interesting twist here because this story begins with Naomi, the mother-in-law of Ruth. She begins with Naomi. That's where the story starts. And then Ruth kind of comes into the forefront, and Naomi kind of goes off into the background, and you don't hear a ton more about Naomi. And so it's really the focus is on Ruth for most of this story in the middle parts of this chapter, middle parts of this book, But now Naomi kind of comes into the forefront again. The baby is born, and now Naomi's right back at the focal point. The women of the city seem to play a pretty large part in this story. So Ruth, important, right? She's kind of the focus, and now baby's born, and now Naomi is the focal point. These women, most scholars agree, these are the same women that are surrounding her, are the women that were with her when she came back in all of her grief coming back from Moab. Ruth chapter 1, verse 19, just for reference. It says this, so the two of them, Ruth and Naomi, went out and until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" It's almost, that's written in the way that the women were, it was in this kindness, like, "Isn't this our friend Naomi?" What this is to me, you look at this story, these women, they're with Naomi in her grief, and now they're with her in her joy. They're walking with Naomi in her grief, and now they are walking with her in her joy. This is a really good picture of biblical community. Having people in your life that can walk with you in your grief. And I don't mean just like give you the church answer like, "Hey, praying for you, bud." I mean people that are really in the trenches with you, that are walking with you, that are upholding you, that are supporting you, that are whatever they can do to take that burden of life off of you in that moment, in that season. That's the kind of community that I'm talking about. They're walking with you in the pain, but they're also walking with you and celebrating with you in the highs. People that aren't afraid to celebrate, to look at your life and say, "Wow, I'm so glad at what God is doing in your life." Instead of being jealous, they're excited about what God's doing in your life. This is biblical community. This is why we continue, and you will continue to hear us from here on out, that we're going to push community groups around here. You're going to get tired of us talking about it, and you're going to feel guilty, and one day you're going to show up, and you're going to just love it, and you're never going to go away. Do you have these people in your life that are walking with you in your highest of highs and your lowest of lows? That are supporting you in the darkest seasons of your life, that are celebrating with you when things are worth celebrating? Here's what I would tell you. You can't have that kind of relationship with surface level acquaintances that we have at church. Saying good morning on Sunday morning, as much as we love it, and I love to see your faces, it's not enough. We have to walk in deep community together. We have to know one another. And the writer goes on and says, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel." Notice the attention being on Naomi again. The Lord has not left who? Naomi, without a redeemer. This is so interesting to me because we've spent the last few weeks talking about Ruth, and the focus has been on Ruth, how Ruth lays herself at the feet of the Redeemer and proposes to him and says, I want you to be my Redeemer. I want you to marry me. I want you to rescue me. All the focus is on Ruth, and now we get to the baby being born, and these ladies say, blessed be the Lord who has not left you, Naomi, without a Redeemer. But we need to remember the redeeming was not just so that Ruth could be married, but the redeeming was to carry on the name and the lineage of Elimelech. Remember last week why some people didn't want to be the redeemer, and why this the first closest relative did not want to redeem Ruth is because it costs you everything, but you don't get the benefit, right? The land, if he was to purchase the land from Naomi so that he could marry Ruth, the land doesn't even stay in his own family name. It goes to the children. And when he has children, the children don't even carry his last name. It carries Elimelech's last name. The Redeemer had all the costs, but no benefit to it. And so now they're looking and saying, Naomi, you've been redeemed. Your family lineage has been carried on. It says that redeeming, it says that you're going to have this future hope, is what they were saying. This future of Naomi and Ruth having this future hope because of their Redeemer. No longer do they have to wonder what their future was going to look like. No longer do they have to wonder if we're going to have to spend our days in a field gleaning off the edge of the field, just getting enough just to get by. Picking the leftovers from a already harvested field so that I could just survive. No longer do they have to wonder that. They knew their future. They knew what was going to be happening. They had no more poverty, but their future was secure. Now, I know that in our world we talk a lot about securing things for the future and preparing for the future, and it is nice to know that your future can be taken care of, right? Like you're probably working now to save money or prepare for college or prepare for weddings, and you're trying to do all these things that you're going to have to pay for later on in life. And somebody asked me the other day, hey, Derek, how are y'all going to pay for all those kids to go to college? I said, they better be smart. That's it. That's all I got. You prepare and you're working towards something. It gives you this security of the future, doesn't it? Knowing you have a job and a paycheck that's going to come in every week or every other week or once a month or whatever the case is, knowing, hey, I can count on that. That gives you security. There's something about that security that we like. I don't know anybody that would enjoy working and not knowing if they're going to get paid. There's a security to it. And it comes to Ruth and Naomi, their future was now secure for what they were going to be taken care of. But this is also the case for our spiritual lives. This is the case for our spiritual lives, that because those that have trusted in Jesus, we have been redeemed, we have been purchased. And because of that, because we have been redeemed, we now have a secure hope in our future. We have a secure hope in our future of what our future is going to look like. We don't have to wonder what our future holds. We can take joy in the fact that our future is secure as followers of Jesus. What that should be for us is an anchor point in our life that we're able to look at and say, no matter what happens here, I know that I'm well taken care of because I'm in the shadow of the Almighty. He's provided for me. He has redeemed me. He has put his wings over me. He has become my Redeemer. And because of that, I know what my future holds. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 17. It says, for this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. This light and momentary affliction. Think about who's writing this for a moment, the Apostle Paul, who is beaten, imprisoned, arrested, charged, tried, mocked, spit on. And what does he say? Oh, these light and momentary afflictions. Why? That's challenging. It's such a hope because it's a hope for the future that even though we face troubles on this earth, they seem light and momentary compared to the weight of glory. I'm going to ask you a question this morning. How often do you think about your future with Jesus? How often do you think about your future with Jesus? How often do you think about eternity? I don't know how your mind works, but I know when I think about eternity, my brain hurts. I have a hard time. I'm just I think about it for a moment. I'm like, yes. And I'm like, I just can't get there. It's like something with my brain that just hurts when I think about eternity because it's forever. How often do you think about eternity? Does it inform how you live today? Does it give you encouragement knowing that what I'm walking through now, hey, it may be challenging, but I know what my future holds. I know what eternity is going to look like. Are you looking forward to the day that you're going to spend eternity in perfection and peace, no trouble, no sorrow, no pain, no death? It informs how we live when we think about it. It informs how we live when we think about it. Let's look at verse 15. As you're looking there, let me just say this. Let's not minimize our future. We have to keep it in the forefront of our minds. Don't get so wrapped up in the world and securing things for your financial future and securing things for your children that you forget what our future really looks like. Verse 15. He says this. He shall be, the ladies say, he shall be a restorer of life to you, a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you is more to you than 7 sons has given birth to him. Now, I have my own kids. Lindsay and I have 4 children. They are the perfect little angels every time. And I love our kids, but what I hear is that having grandkids is even better. Any grandparents in the room? I think it's because you can pass them right back off to us. Naomi now sits with her grandchild in her hands, and her friends say that he's going to be a restorer of life and a nourisher in her old age. Some interesting choices of words here. This baby was going to restore the restorer of life. This baby was going to restore the line and the lineage of Elimelech, who she thought at this point was dead. And you remember, one of the greatest curses, if you remember a couple weeks ago we talked about this, one of the greatest curses of this time that you could say to somebody is that may your seed and your lineage die away. That would be the greatest curse that you could say to somebody. So Naomi's sitting here thinking, what's been brought on me is the curse of God in my life, and I have nothing left. Nothing is going to go forward. Nothing is going to go on. Elimelech, his line is gone. And now, this line is going to continue. He's going to restore the life and the line of Elimelech. And he says, these ladies say, this one's going to be a nourisher of old age. After all the pain and all the bitterness of the last decade or so, she can now see the fruition, the coming to of God's hand in the middle of her life, in the middle of her pain. It's nourishing to her. For some reason, maybe it's because I grew up in the South, but I just get this picture of this elderly grandmother who's been through a lot of life, sitting in a rocking chair and just holding her grandchild, knowing that God's been faithful through every moment and season of her life. I don't know about you, but there's something about talking to somebody that's followed Jesus for a really long time, for decades. They're towards the end of their life. My ear's a little bit more tuned to what they're saying than others. I want to hear what they've been through. I want to hear what they've experienced. I want to hear about the faithfulness of God in their life. And so she's sitting, I just kind of envision her sitting there holding this grandchild, rocking back and forth, knowing that God's been faithful through all the seasons, full of joy. It's nourishment to her. This grandchild is nourishment to her. And I really believe this, that all of us that are followers of Jesus, we're going to be able to look back on our life at the end of our life, and we're going to be able to see that God's been faithful through every season and every situation. I hope that you believe it. For some, you may be walking through such a challenging season right now, it's hard to see. It's hard to imagine looking at what you're walking through right now and saying, man, I just don't know. I don't understand what God's trying to do in here. I don't understand what God's trying to say in this moment. And it's challenging. It's difficult. It's hard to see in the moment at times. But we know and we trust that God is faithful. And I know in my own life and in my own stories and in my own seasons, although there have been really incredibly difficult times, I can look back on every situation and I can see how God has moved and changed and arranged things in my life that I would never taken that path. I would have never decided to do that. I would have never went that way. But because of the leading of the Lord, the sovereignty, and his directing in my life, man, you can see it when you're on the other side of it. You can't always see it in the middle of it. And then the ladies go on and say, for your daughter-in-law, Ruth, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. This is such a good line. This now goes to, so it's been, focus has been on Naomi, and now it's given this credit to Ruth here. And it's like, this is, your daughter-in-law is worth more than 7 sons. Now, throughout this story, we have heard over and over about the character of Ruth. Right? It says her character was renowned in the entire city. The people at the city gate knew of her character. They could look at it and trust it and say, this lady is worth so much value. She's got so much character. She walks with uprightness. She's got the everything that you would want in somebody that's a follower of Yahweh. She's got it. She clung to Naomi, incredibly loyal to Naomi, left her hometown, left her parents, and clung to her mother-in-law, came back to Judah in Bethlehem, and these ladies say she's worth more than 7 sons. Now, in the Hebrew culture, the number 7 represents perfection, and to have 7 sons would be considered to be the perfect family. The perfect family. I mean, if you could imagine, like, like now we're in the Instagram culture, everybody's got a perfect family, don't they? They just got a few filters and a few things they put on. It's like, oh, they got the perfect family. Look at that. No one ever posts the pictures of their kids on the ground screaming, do they? It's always the good stuff. Oh, he got like teacher or student of the week award. Ooh, yeah, what did he do last week? That's what I want to say. Keep posting your stuff. I don't care, but I'm going to judge you. 7 sons. This is the perfect family, ideal family. This was the dream. If you were a Hebrew Israelite, to have 7 sons in your lineage would be like, whew, that man just got the favor of God. He's got 7 sons that are going to carry on the lineage of our name. Like, this is incredible. Like, this is awesome. Now, for me to think about this is the highest of level that you could have as a family, 7 sons. And now they're saying that Ruth is more value to Naomi than 7 sons. This is somebody that just lost 2 sons not too long ago. And this is in a culture that, as best as we can tell from our study, that did not value women in the way that we see today. Right? The woman was, their value was in how they raised their family. It was just in the home. And even after their husband was passed away, it was kind of like, sorry, it's just tough luck. They didn't value women like we see today. And so these women, what they're saying is like, look, this one woman is worth seven sons to you. The perfect family that you could imagine, it's worth more than that. You couldn't think of a better compliment. Verse 16. And then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. Now, this line can be a little bit confusing because then it says she became his nurse. This is not the actual nurse. She's not nursing a baby. She's not feeding a baby. The word used here for nurse really could be translated as nanny. She became his nanny. She became the caretaker for this sweet grandchild, right? Like she's rocking the baby, putting the baby down, caring for the child when the mother couldn't, when Ruth couldn't, or when Ruth needed a break. And all the moms said, amen, no, 3 of y'all. You know what that's like, right? You just need that break. Like I need somebody to grab my child, take the child, or let me go. I don't care. I'll just go walk around Target because there's nothing else to do. This is such a sweet moment of redemption for Naomi. I want you to imagine all that Naomi has been through. She had her arms full. She had a loving, caring husband that was providing for her. She had 2 sons that, as far as we can tell, were godly and following the Lord. Arms full of love, but then in a matter of 10 years, all taken from her. Empty. But now we see this redemption coming back to where the Lord is just putting this love back into her. She embraces this new child. The word that it actually uses for putting in the lap is bosom. She picks this child up And what it indicates is not just I'm going to set the child on my knee. It's a tight hold. It's where you hug somebody. I've grown up in church, and so I'm really good at the side hug. Y'all know the side hug? I give everybody the side hug. How's it going? You just give them the hip. That's the trick. You're welcome, by the way. And so, but it's not a side-to-side hug. It's like when I see my friend Tyler, I don't give Tyler the side hug. And if I give you the side hug, it doesn't mean I don't like you. That's not what I'm saying. This is going really bad. I should have thought this out as I was preparing this. But when I see my friend Tyler, I hug him and we squeeze. That's what the word indicates when it says she put the child in her lap. It's like this, she uses bosom because it's like your stomachs are together, pressed together. It's like you're squeezed, like your souls are connected because you're squeezing so hard. And so imagine this woman that has had all this loss and all this grief and all this pain. She picks this grandchild up and she puts him in her lap and she just squeezes him like, thank you, Lord. That's the picture that we're getting from Naomi here. It's a beautiful picture of redemption. Life has a weird way of working itself out sometimes. But in the end, we can see God's hand through it. Let's look at verse 17. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. This has to be one of the funniest lines in all of the scriptures to me. Could you imagine? Think about this for a moment. Your church community naming your child. Could you imagine? David, on Wednesday night, if somebody tells us they're pregnant, you know what we're going to do? We're going to name the child for them. It's a really strange situation here. Like, imagine sitting there with your child or your grandchild and thinking like, we'll name this child John. And old Susie in the back's like, nope, it's Obed. Perfect. That's the one. My mind kind of goes to, where's Ruth at in this moment? Like, is Ruth even nearby? And they're like naming this child and she's going to show up. And it's like, by the way, your child's name is Obed. She has to be thinking like, I birthed this child. I'm going to name this child. You don't mess with a newborn baby's mom, do you? But they did a pretty good job of naming this baby because Obed, this child's name, translates as servant or worshiper in the Hebrew. Servant or worshiper. The servant named Obed, this worshiper named Obed, was a grandfather to the eventual King David, who was the ultimate servant of Yahweh, a man after God's own heart, who was the ultimate worshiper of Yahweh, who danced through the street in his underwear, undignified to the Lord. For us to get a full picture of what's going on here, I want us to go all the way back to Judges chapter 21, the book right before Ruth, a few chapters back. Judges chapter 21. Look what it says, the last verse of this book. It says, in those days, there was no king in Israel. There was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This is the time of the judges. They had no king, they had no leader, and people did what was right in their own eyes, not in the eyes of the Lord. The beginning of Ruth, it says that during the time of judges, and the days when the judges ruled is what it says in Ruth chapter 1. So during the time of Ruth and Naomi, there is no king of Israel. There's no leader of the people of God. They're saying, hey, this is where we're going. This is what God has said, and we're gonna go in this direction. They're just floundering in their sin. They're floundering in their own pursuit of the world. And now at the end of Judges chapter 21, it says they've been left without a king. See, this entire story, not only is God redeeming Ruth through Boaz, but he's also redeeming his people. He's redeeming his people, the people of Israel, who don't deserve his redemption, right? Because they've turned their backs on him, right? They have completely turned their backs on who God is, on what he's asked them to do. He's just said, nope, too bad. We're gonna do what's right in our own eyes. But yet God says, no, I've got something better for you. You don't deserve it, but I'm going to redeem you. And so now this baby, Obed, who was born in Bethlehem, 2 generations later would come the greatest king of Israel, David, born in Bethlehem, the same city. And then 14 generations after this, in the city of Bethlehem, the ultimate Redeemer was going to come to be born. You see how the Bible is not just a bunch of random stories that are pieced together and glued together and bound in a book. It is one overarching theme of the redemption of God from the beginning page to the last page that he is weaving throughout, that I've got my people and I'm redeeming my people. It's amazing to watch. This is also a good reminder, I think, for all of us. Because I know this is true for my own life, and I would imagine it's true for your life, is that we tend to focus on this little slice of time in the history of the world that we call our lifetime. And that's what is most important to us. This little blip on the map of time. And we tend to think like that's all that matters, is right here, this little dot of time on the map of the history of the world. But we have to remember that God is not just working just in our lives. He's not working just in this generation or the next generation. He's working and he's focused on the whole picture. He's the God of the universe. He's the God of all time, all of history, all of the future. And it's a good reminder to us. When things don't turn out the way that you think that they should turn out, know that God is working and moving things that you can't even see or understand right now. Verse 18. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron, and Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. Genealogies, everybody's favorite. You ever started the New Testament Bible reading plan? You start in Matthew 1, you're like, I'm going to go to Genesis. I'm thankful for modern biblical literal translations, right? Because for most of my life growing up, I was like, I don't know what begot is, but it's a lot of them. So-and-so begot so-and-so. So-and-so begot so-and-so. What's interesting to me about these names, and Ruth's name included, what these genealogies do is they tell us the story of God's faithfulness from generation to generation. It's not a picture of the faithfulness of the people, it's a picture of God's faithfulness. That God is faithful from the first generation to the last generation. And what we see with this is that these are not any special people that we just read about in the story. Like, I would imagine for most of us, that unless you've studied the book of Ruth, you have no clue who Perez is or Hezron or Ram, right? You're just Bible names, right? I don't think many people are naming their child Ram, right? So you may not hear about it. I'm sorry if you have a distant cousin or something like that, his name Ram, because that would be weird. But these are just ordinary people. Ordinary, everyday people. But they were obedient to God. Ordinary, everyday people, but obedient to God. They walked in integrity. They honored God. They allowed God to use their lives for his kingdom, and he used them to change the landscape of the people of God. Al, you can come. Matthew chapter 1. Ruth is mentioned in a genealogy of Jesus. What's interesting about that is for a lot of genealogies, only the males are recognized. Only the males are mentioned. But in the genealogy of Jesus, not only males, there's women, but there's a character of just some fallen, broken human beings that are in the middle of Jesus' genealogy. And it's amazing to read and study. If you've not done that study, you should. But let's remember for a moment, just in the person of Ruth, let's remember where Ruth came from. Ruth was a Moabite. The Moabites were they were somewhat kin to the Israelites, but these were the product of Lot and his daughters that slept with their father. Ancestral relationship. They're the descendants of this. I mean, could you imagine the shame and the dirtiness and the filthiness that was to kind of come of that people because of even their beginnings, and that's where they came from. These were not people that followed Yahweh. They worshiped the god of Chemosh, and part of their worship included child sacrifice. You talk about wild, just darkness. It was in the people of Moab. These were not good people. These were not God-honoring, God-fearing people. And this is who is in the genealogy of Jesus. Why? Sure, Ruth was faithful. Sure, Ruth was godly, had character. But it wasn't because of any of that. She's in the genealogy of Jesus because she's been redeemed by the Redeemer. It's not because of what she's done. It's because she trusted in Yahweh. You remember back where she says, your God is going to be my God. Your people are going to be my people. She saw the faithfulness of God in Naomi's life. And she's like, I'm going with you. I imagine that Ruth had probably seen plenty of darkness in the following of this evil God that required child sacrifice. She's like, I want what you have. Ruth is a picture of humanity. It's a picture of our lives. That without Jesus, we are estranged from God, that we are separated from God. This is the great separation that we talk about, the great chasm, that we're on this side, God's on this side. The only way to get to that other side is not through our work, but through the redemption and the work of Jesus. Because of the Redeemer, just like Ruth, we can be welcomed into the family of God, grafted in, adopted in. But if Ruth is a picture of humanity, then what about Boaz? Charles Spurgeon said it this way, is that Jesus is our glorious Boaz. Jesus is our glorious Boaz. Boaz came to survey his field, but Jesus came to survey the earth. Boaz looked out and saw Ruth, but Jesus looked down and saw us. Boaz spoke kindly to Ruth. Jesus speaks kindly to us. Let's not forget that it is the kindness of Jesus that leads us to repentance. I don't think I've ever seen somebody get saved because they thought God was angry at them. We serve a God that is kind. Ruth found favor in Boaz's eyes, and we found favor in Jesus' eyes. Boaz became Ruth's kinsman redeemer, and Jesus became our kinsman redeemer. It's the gospel, and it's beautiful, and it never gets old, ever. Tim Keller said it this way. I'm going to mess it up, but he said the gospel is not the ABCs, but it's the A to Z. It's everything. We sometimes think that we graduate in maturity from needing to hear the gospel message in our lives, and I would just tell you that's not the truth. You need to hear it every single day. That it is not by your work, but it is by the work of Jesus. That it is not by your willpower and your discipline that you can call yourself a follower of Jesus. It is only his work. He saw us, and he saw us with kindness in his eyes. He saw us and had compassion on us as a broken human being that had no reason to be redeemed other than God's mercy and grace. I want you to bow your heads with me for a moment.